Tonight on Canton Confidential.
That Karen Reed had struck this officer with a car, gave you license to call her a
Potentially damning text messages by the lead investigator.
So my emotions got the best of me. This investigation was done with the utmost integrity.
Calling into question the Reed investigation.
Trooper Proctor, you're the one responsible for gathering the evidence, correct?
Tonight, we're taking a deeper dive into what everyone is talking about.
Did you, in your mind, have this case wrapped up? Was it cut and dry in your mind?
Yes.
Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial, starts right now.
Emotions were running high in court today with Trooper Michael Proctor back on the stand. Good evening, everyone. I'm J.C. Monahan.
And I'm Glenn Jones. We want to give you a warning now, early in our show. Some of the language used in today's testimony may be inappropriate for younger viewers. In fact, potentially difficult no matter what your age. Let's get you caught up. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor first took the stand on Monday as a witness for the Commonwealth. He's the lead investigator in the Karen Reed case.
Trooper Proctor's professionalism during this investigation is being called into question, not just for a possible conflict of interest, which we're going to talk more about a little later, but for the words he used when talking about Karen Reed to friends and colleagues.
His comments and text messages were just a small portion of today's testimony. Our Kirsten Glavin is live in Dedham with a complete overview of what played out in court today. Kirsten, another pretty big day.
It really was. The integrity of this entire investigation is once again being called into question. Trooper Michael Proctor was asked today to describe some of those text messages, one in particular that he sent to his sister, saying that he hoped Karen Reed would kill herself. In a fiery finale to his cross-examination, Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor forced to listen to insults and graphic comments he texted friends and colleagues about Karen Reed during his investigation.
That was the word you used, a figure of speech, right?
Correct.
A girl who herself, right?
Correct.
And then her, correct?
Correct.
On several occasions, the lead investigator making fun of Reed's medical condition. Then to his sister stating, quote, hopefully she kills herself.
You literally said that you hope that Karen Reed, the subject of your investigation, the woman sitting to my left about 7 feet from me, that she would just die, correct?
The figure of speech.
Trooper Proctor admitting to dehumanizing Reed, but when asked multiple times about the integrity of his investigation, Proctor remaining steadfast in his response.
I stand by the integrity of this investigation, as well as every trooper and supervisor in my office.
Then laying out what he believes happened.
Mr. O'Keefe got out of that vehicle holding that cocktail glass he walked out of the waterfall bar with. Miss Reed pulled ahead and then backed into him, struck him with her vehicle, and then left.
Earlier, Proctor questioned about his relationships with the Albert family and his response to inconclusive autopsy results of John O'Keefe's body.
Well, then why would you say, of course it's undetermined? She was a whack job, sarcastically.
It was a sarcastic remark I made to Trooper DeChico.
The trooper also admitting to disclosing case information.
These were details, internal details about the investigation, weren't they?
Yes.
And you were sharing them with your sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully next on the stand, testifying that he reported Trooper Proctor to his supervisors.
I expressed my displeasure as unprofessionalism and the content of them, and then I reported up my chain of command.
Later explaining and showing evidence collected.
The ridges that are along the top end here that appear on both pieces.
Outside of court Wednesday, we caught up with Reed's defense. They're really harping on the fact that obviously crude behavior and language was used, but that the integrity was not jeopardized here. Do you think that's possible?
No. Integrity, the definition of integrity, which is why I asked him, do you even know the definition of integrity? It means honesty. It means something more than just you get to get away with an apology when you engage in that kind of crude conduct. This entire investigation has no integrity. He has no integrity. And the fact that the Massachusetts State Police have not fired him means they have no integrity.
Now, we have reached out to Trooper Proctor's attorney about the testimony you just heard today. We're still waiting to hear back. And we have been reaching out to Mass State Police for a comment as well about the testimony we've been hearing in this trial. They still have not responded to our requests for a comment. Now, in terms of where we go from here, Detective Lieutenant Tully will be back on the stand first thing when court resumes. Glenn, JC.
Kirsten, thank you. Michael Coyne. Michael, it was, for many, very difficult to hear these words repeated. In your opinion, can a juror hear language like this from a lead investigator and still accept the findings of his investigation?
Theoretically, they could. They could get past the vulgarity and the unprofessionalism and accept it. The problem is this case wasn't strong before the testimony, and it certainly wasn't aided through Trooper Proctor's testimony. And that's the problem. When you consider what the burden of proof is that the government has, beyond all reasonable doubt, they have to prove all the elements of the offense, there will be people on the jury that may not get past it. And even if they can, there are so many other holes in the case that I think the government is in a very difficult position to expect a conviction at this point.
One of the things that the defense foreshadowed in opening statements was a conflict of interest for Trooper Proctor. To what extent do you think they effectively established that? We heard the story today about Kevin Albert, where it did seem like they were friendlier than Trooper Proctor wanted us to believe.
It sounds like the whole relationship is far too incestuous to have any degree of separation that you would trust the investigation. Canton obviously is a lot smaller town than I would have thought. And the fact is that when you start to look at the different levels and the disclosures, did you know them? Did you have a relationship? We're parsing words at that point, and I think the jury is likely going to see through some of that and really say, well, why was he involved in this case? Law enforcement, as they saw, had a conflict. They should have stepped out.
Well, to be clear, Kevin Albert, the brother of Brian Albert, who's the home where all of this happened, worked on a cold case with...
Because he's a Canton police officer.
Because he's, right, a Canton police officer. You can't get more direct contact than two people working side by side and say that you don't have a relationship of some sort with them.
And drank with him and went to the same health club. There was obviously a greater relationship than he let on, both likely to his superiors as well as others. And that's problematic. Again, think of the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If jurors are looking for and question some of the evidence, that's going to make it very difficult to get to beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, both O.J. and Casey Anthony were found not guilty, in part because of police misconduct. We may end up seeing the same result here.
All right, Michael, stay right there. He's not going anywhere. When we come back, our Sue O'Connell will join the conversation.
The shock and surprise and confusion she witnessed in the courtroom when Proctor was asked about that inverted surveillance videos. So much attention around this piece of evidence. Stay with us. You're watching Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
Anything else you noticed that was odd about the video?
Yeah, the timestamp on the bottom of it was kind of backwards.
Was it blue?
I believe it was yellow.
So the video you saw had a timestamp that was inverted, correct?
Yes.
How about the video itself?
No, from the one that I watched had the correct angle, it wasn't reversed. The car was brought in, tow truck driver gets out. From the driver's side, it wasn't reversed. The only thing reversed on it was like the timestamp on the bottom.
Well, that was part of an exchange between Defense Attorney Alan Jackson and Trooper Michael Proctor this afternoon. They are talking about this surveillance video from inside the Sally Port that we showed you last week. The version presented by the prosecution appears to be inverted or mirrored. Joining us here at the table now is Sue O'Connell, our courtroom insider and commentator. And so, Sue, you were there for this exchange, and I know you witnessed something that really we didn't get necessarily if we were watching on TV.
Yes, Alan Jackson was surprised by Proctor's answer. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I talked to some people who have watched Alan Jackson for years, and they said he was indeed surprised. And Proctor, I think, also was a little surprised that Jackson was reacting to his answer like, what am I saying? I'm just saying what I saw. Why are people reacting to this?
And why are they?
And because it seems that, according to the testimony, Proctor has a video that he was watching that he testified he watched yesterday, he watched earlier, that he believes was introduced as the evidence that doesn't match the video that we saw in the courtroom that the prosecution And entered. And we were all kind of joking that it seems like Proctor's the only one who isn't watching the trial on TV like everyone else. Like he actually seemed surprised about these questions. So the whole Sallyport video is, again, open for debate and conversation. I'm sure Alan Jackson and the defense will have questions about it, but it's a different timestamp, a different color, and not inverted. So when did it get inverted? When did the time stamp change from a different color? And where did it come from? And, of course, Jackson asked those questions.
Wow. So we haven't seen the exact same video that seems Trooper Proctor has seen. All right, we've heard a lot this week about Trooper Proctor's unprofessional comments, about Karen Reed, of course. But, Michael, we want to ask you about the way Attorney Jackson wrapped up his cross-examination of Proctor. Here's a clip. We'll discuss it on the other side.
To pin it on the girl who's just a whack job, in your words, who you hope just kills herself, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Shame on you, sir.
Objection.
All right, so jurors, disregard that. I've told you before, lawyers can't make comments. They can ask questions. And Mr. Jackson, you know better than that.
All right, Michael, that had some Hollywood-like drama to it, but is it appropriate?
No, it's not. And Judge did the correct ruling by striking it and telling him not to do it. It's a little bit of grandstanding, as you point out, is a little bit of L.A. That's where he's from. And it might appeal to the jurors, but also at some point that cross-examination had to end. And so it's a little over the top, and some jurors might have been put off by it.
Okay, so that leads me to my question, because what Alan Jackson did on cross was repeatedly say the awful, vulgar words and statements loudly, clearly for everyone to hear. When Sue comes in after her long day, we have to talk, right? So my first thing was, I found that egregious. I thought that was, for me, personally, if I were a juror, too much. I don't need you to say them again loudly. Sue had a different response where she said, well, you should have been there because the jurors were doing this, right? Am I
Yeah, they were looking at
correctly?
Proctor as if, listen to what he's saying, that's what you said.
So when is it too much?
It's a great question. You're too young to know, but Rodney King's case, the jury...
Oh, what a nice compliment.
The jury was desensitized to the violence in the video in the state case and ultimately found the 4 police officers not guilty. So there is a balance there, is what I'm trying to say. And the fact is that some jurors might have found it too offensive and went on too long. We heard a number of words far too often that we should not ever hear. And so there may be some blowback on that from the jurors. We don't know until we hear their results and hear their comments, if any, at the end of this.
Sure.
I mean, there was a juror who winced every single time a bad word was said.
He did see me jump twice.
Yeah, even when JC hears it with the bleeped out, it still startles her.
It just
and I
made me
think
go
that's
like,
true for
whoa.
some people who are on the jury as well, because we've heard some awful words in this trial for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that there will be jurors who will, at some point, either become desensitized to it or angry that it has been said so often by the attorneys, not just the witness.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
It was a good conversation. The fallout from the Karen Reed murder trial continues.
Could testimony from Trooper Proctor impact other cases that he has investigated? That is next on Canton Confidential.
The rest of the unprofessional and regrettable comments are something I'm not proud of. Again, unprofessional comments I should not have made, that I'm not proud of. These juvenile, unprofessional comments have zero impact. Again, unprofessional messages I should not have sent. They weren't professional comments. Our office, it's kind of a little bit of a locker room. Again, a regrettable comment I made about Miss Reed's medical condition. A distasteful joke. I should have gave a proper update. I used regrettable language. Again, unprofessional language. Again, it was a poor joke. Like I had said, Mr. Jackson, it was an inappropriate joke. I believe poor jokes have, in unprofessional language, have no bearing on the integrity and the facts and physical evidence of this case. And it was a poor choice of words and a joke. It was unprofessional of me. Through these text messages, absolutely not. They were juvenile and regrettable.
So that admitted conduct could potentially impact another high-profile homicide case that Proctor is connected to.
We've touched on it a little already here on Canton Confidential. Proctor is the case officer in the ongoing Brian Walsh case. Walsh is accused of killing his wife, Anna, in their Cohasset home last year before allegedly dismembering and discarding her body. An attorney for Brian Walsh told me today he plans to file a motion that names Proctor and any other investigator implicated in questionable conduct in the Reed case who is also working the Walsh case. Walsh's defense attorney, Larry Tipton, says he has not yet concluded there is any investigator bias toward his client, but what he's heard in the Reed trial has raised his suspicions. The Norfolk County DA's office is prosecuting both the Reed and Walsh murder cases. The DA's office did not respond to our request for comment. Neither did a lawyer for Proctor. Michael Coyne is back with us. So I feel like you and Catherine on Monday, soon as you heard the testimony from Trooper Proctor, foresaw a moment like this one. So when this attorney files a motion, what might he ask the court to do?
Well, he's first going to ask for discovery. He probably wants the same access that we saw in this case to the cell phone records, to any other exchanges with other folks, to try and make a determination and gather the information to support that the prosecution was biased from the outset. And he will use the actions in this case to support the sloppy procedures, the unprofessional conduct, and try to muddy the waters in his case, at the minimum, by gathering that information. You know, there's an old defense tactic that if you can't try the case, try the police. And that's in part what we're seeing in this case, and that's what we'll see in Cohasset.
And you would expect the court to be sympathetic to that?
I would expect the court, based on the information we have received in this case, to give the defendant some latitude. Remember, both of these, this defendant as well as Matthew Walsh, are on trial for their life. It's a life imprisonment sentence. And the court has to be respectful and, under the Constitution, provide them access to what we would call exculpatory information. They're entitled to get that, and it's mandatory that it be turned over. So the court is going to give them some latitude in trying to look to see if, in fact, there also was a rush to judgment in that case as well as in this.
And that's another high-profile case. This is a state police trooper, however, so this goes all of Massachusetts. Could there be more fallout from lesser-known cases?
Yeah, no doubt about it. The fact is, if you were sitting in prison right now and Matthew Proctor was one of the key witnesses against you, haven't you already made your trip to the law library, and haven't you already talked to your lawyer and a new lawyer to say, I want a new trial? We're not going to see the end of this. It's very similar to what we saw with the drug lab cases. It starts out with a small one, and at some point then it's a snowball of all of these cases where the evidence is potentially tainted and people want new trials and want to revisit whether they received due process.
All right, Michael, and we did bring up the Anna Walsh murder trial. If you're interested in that murder case, we do have a podcast called The Searches for Anna Walsh. You can just scan that QR code on your screen or search Anna Walsh on your favorite, whatever podcast platform you use.
We still got more tonight here on Canton Confidential. Sue O'Connell returns to answer your questions. She'll share her take on the reactions we cannot see in the courtroom. Back in studio with us is Sue O'Connell, our courtroom insider and commentator. You're getting this unique view of the trial that we can't get at home. So that means so many people want to know what it is you're seeing that we can't see.
Hundreds of questions. So we have a viewer named Sue H., and she asks us in part, how is John O'Keefe's family reacting to testimony such as today?
So we're seated behind them. So just for full disclosure, we can't necessarily see them. Sometimes I'm able to go over to the right and take a look at them. The testimony today, which we didn't talk about, was when Lieutenant Tully also took out John O'Keefe's other sneaker and other evidence from the crime scene. And that is, I could see Mrs. O'Keefe from the back with her head down. It was incredibly painful. Paul O'Keefe was also looking emotional. You know, these are the last pieces of clothing that John O'Keefe was wearing. So it's always an emotional moment.
There was also a photo. They did have a photo from the ER. It was from the knees down, basically, but still would be incredibly upsetting.
Yeah, so that is definitely upsetting to them. And they're just very quiet, and they come and go. They don't interact with other people. And I think part of it is just being respectful of their space. So.
Yeah. You know, it is interesting where they're sitting because there are moments when the camera is focused on Karen Read when you can also see them. And you can see they're just, they're carrying a heavy burden.
Right. And the jury can see them, too. I mean, that's an also very important point, that the jury is staring right at them because they are right across from them in the courtroom. So whatever emotions they're having or whatever's happening are on full view for the jury to see.
Okay. Sue O'Connor, thank you.
You're welcome.
Testimony resumes tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll be back here at 7 to bring you complete recap with expert analysis.
As always, you can follow our coverage of the Karen Read murder trial online and on our app. You just scan that QR code or head to NBC10boston.com.